Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Grayzone. Big show today. Max Blumenthal here with Aaron Mate as always. And we'll hopefully have a surprise special guest later in the show. There's so much to cover because obviously heavy news. War has erupted. Israel has launched a new regime change war against Iran in what was a surprise attack that probably should have surprised no one. Iran has retaliated and initiated True Promise 3 after waiting for a very long time. I have published at our YouTube channel an interview with Dr. Fouadizadeh, who's one of the most prolific commentators inside Iran and is a professor of world studies at the University of Tehran. The interview took place amid airstrikes. You can hear the air defense systems active in the background and jets overhead. And that will provide, I think, a lot of context for the conversation. If you watch that, I'll drop it in the chat in a second. And we'll take, any of your questions, especially as super chats throughout this. There's so many directions we can go with this stream, but we're going to just try to cover a lot of what's taken place in the last 72 hours, starting with the Israeli attack, the Trump administration's real role. We'll try to get to the bottom of that, Iran's response and where things go next, and maybe some background on the insidious role of the IAEA, which is kind of functioning like a OPCW in this scenario. Aaron, what's your reaction after the last 48 hours before we start kind of summarizing events?
Israel is pathologically committed to aggression and supremacy. And so them bringing their barbarism to Iran is, as you said, not a surprise. Iran is the major force in the region that deters Israeli aggression. And so they were always on the Israeli-U.S. target list. And looking back now, all this talk from Trump about diplomacy with Iran and trying to reach a deal, that was just used as a ruse, as a smokescreen to prepare for something like this. And, as from what we can glean from all the reporting so far, especially what's coming out of Israel, Trump was in on it. Trump was in on Netanyahu's plan to attack Iran and to try to go after regime change. And as we're going to air right now, one of the latest Israeli attacks on Iran has targeted gas fields, which is civilian infrastructure. Has nothing to do with nuclear weapons, which again is a fake pretext because Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. But energy, gas fields, that's an attempt to try to cripple Iran's economy. And why do they want to do that? Because they want regime change. That's ultimately their goal. That's what they're pursuing. And that's what all this is about.
Couldn't have said it better. This is the next phase of the Israeli unprovoked assault on Iran, is to attack its economic infrastructure, attack civilian infrastructure, gas fields, oil fields. And remember, before this began, there was a mysterious attack on the Bandar Abbas port. 3 facilities were simultaneously detonated or blown up. And that kind of previewed what Israel planned to do. This is a regime change war. And in regime change wars, Israel needs to bring the entire country to the ground. And so, it started with a decapitation attack, which was always going to be the first stage of the Israeli assault. And now it's moving towards attacks on the heartbeat of Iran's economy, which has managed to withstand decades of sanctions. Now, someone pointed out in the chat that my prediction on Judge Napolitano is not aging well. It wasn't really a prediction. And I said, I could stand to be embarrassed in the next few hours because I said, I can't imagine that Israel would just initiate an attack with talks coming on Sunday between Trump and the Trump administration and Iran in Oman. But I had actually heard from some sources around the administration, it was kind of going around Washington, that there was going to be an attack on Friday. I just couldn't believe it. After all of this time and all of this waiting and having been in Iran, seeing a fairly normally functioning society that was confident, that wasn't anticipating this kind of assault. And I guess with the negotiations taking place, I assumed that there was a period of a respite from war, which would be exploded by Trump finally declaring that the talks were over. And it was a foolish assumption. And the signs of war were everywhere. I mean, this was Tom Cotton, who's one of Israel's top stooges in Congress, declaring today, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, confirmed that Iran's terrorist regime is actively working towards a nuclear weapon for the sake of our national security, the security of our allies and millions of civilians in the region. This cannot be allowed to happen, which is a lie. You can see there's a community note. Hegseth didn't say that. But yeah, the signs were there, and U.S. facilities were military installations were being evacuated across the region. So whether or not I kind of took for granted that this wouldn't take place under negotiations, I kind of would have thought that Iran's military intelligence apparatus would have been prepared for incoming decapitation strikes.
I'm trying to get everybody.
Sorry, that didn't come on right, but let's actually play that clip you mentioned of what Pete Hegseth actually said. This was earlier this week, speaking of Lindsey Graham.
So I'm trying to get everybody to think, let's don't do what we did in the 30s. They're going to use a nuclear weapon if they get it. Are they trying to build a nuclear weapon versus a peaceful nuclear power program, Mr. Secretary? Have the Iranians been trying to build a nuke?
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
What does that mean, to look a lot like a nuclear weapon? Like, what does that even mean? What he means is he knows that they're actually not building a nuclear weapon because that's what U.S. intelligence only recently confirmed back in March. Tulsi Gabbard put out the intelligence report. The consensus view of the U.S. intelligence community is that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. What he meant was they were leaving the door open to becoming a nuclear threshold state, but that's a lot different than building a nuclear weapon. But just Hegseth's comments there, which just don't even really make sense on its face, that was used by people like Tom Cotton to manufacture support for what Israel then just did a few days later, which is to bomb Iran. And before we address, Iran's apparent lack of preparation, the fact that so many military leaders were wiped out very quickly, let's remember what the U.S. stance was in these negotiations. Okay, initially Steve Witkoff was saying, "Yeah, that's fine. Some enrichment, some uranium enrichment from Iran is acceptable. We accept that," because that was, of course, the basis for the original Iran nuclear deal that Trump killed, which is that Iran had the right to peaceful enrichment, which it already has under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But then, as soon as the pro-Israel lobby freaked out about that, Witkoff and Trump changed their tune, and they started saying things like not only zero enrichment for Iran, which is a non-starter because Iran has energy needs that it wants to meet to like service its domestic needs, and also it sees enrichment as a sovereign right. It's something it invested a lot in developing. And Max, you can talk more about this, having recently visited Iran. And then Witkoff also started saying we need to put caps on Iranian missiles. So what basically,
yeah, that's new.
Yeah. So what Witkoff and Trump are basically saying is our demands are that Iran basically neuters itself so that it can't basically meet its domestic energy needs, and also so it can't defend itself. Because if Iran's not going to have nuclear weapons, it needs a way to defend itself from this sociopathic Israeli government that is constantly threatening everybody in the region. And Witkoff is saying Iran has to agree to curbs on its missile program. So Trump and Witkoff imposed terms Iran could never accept. And this came after Trump issued some 60-day deadline for Iran to basically make progress. And if not, this is true. Trump did issue a deadline back in April, which was overlooked. That if Iran didn't meet that, then there was going to be consequences. And then Netanyahu, according to the Wall Street Journal, went to Trump and said, hey, it's 61 days now. Your deadline is passed. I have to do something. And Trump said, okay. So that's why we're here. That's why we're here. And Trump, what Trump could have said was, well, two things. One, I'm not going to insist on impossible demands that have nothing to do with nuclear weapons and that Iran can never accept. And two, no, Netanyahu, like, don't attack Iran, which is apparently what he claims he told Netanyahu weeks earlier. So there's no reason why he couldn't have done that again now.
Yeah, you mentioned the deadline, and the Wall Street Journal has a piece on how Netanyahu, and they always do this, how Netanyahu manipulated Trump using the artificial deadline that Trump established. And Trump always breaks his deadlines. He sets deadlines for negotiations with Ukraine and Russia, and he always breaks it. He doesn't care. It's usually a negotiating tactic. But it's a little different when the country that basically has you by the short and curlies is telling you what to do and manipulating you. This is Eli Clifton summarizing the Wall Street Journal report. It suggests that Trump simply acquiesced to Netanyahu's pressure and did not take strategic or political concerns into account, a disturbing portrayal, if true, of a president largely detached from policy making. That really sounds like the Trump that I know or I've seen. Someone whose brain at this point is like 82% bong water. Not that he's really like, not that I'm saying like Trump is participating in 420, but he's gone. He's not really, he doesn't care about the policy details, and he trusted Netanyahu. Netanyahu, what he always does, tries to do with US presidents, and he usually has had success with Republican presidents or with senators, what he did in Washington during the run-up to the Iraq War when he testified before Congress that Iraq had WMD and was aligning itself with al-Qaeda, is he positions himself as kind of a guide and a teacher and someone who's not just a politician, but he's actually an expert who knows the ways of the Arabs and the Muslims in the region. And you should just trust him and let him guide you. And Trump ultimately did that, according to this Wall Street Journal article. On April 12th, Donald Trump sent Iran's leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, a letter offering nuclear talks. Khamenei warned that this could be a deception that would lead to more sanctions. And then on Friday the 13th of this month, Netanyahu, I mean, he'd already done so, had been pressuring Trump and said the deadline's up. It's 62 days.
On Thursday. So
on Thursday. So
here's the passage.
Up.
Here's the passage in the article. Yeah. When Trump and Netanyahu spoke again on Thursday, the Israeli leaders told Trump it was the last day of the 60-day timeline for Iran to make a deal. Israel could wait no longer, Netanyahu said, according to officials familiar with the call. Israel had to defend itself and enforce the deadline Trump himself had set. So just zooming out now from the article, defend itself from what? Was Iran attacking Israel? What was Israel defending itself against? It just makes absolutely no sense. And why does Israel have to enforce Trump's deadline? If Trump made that deadline, that's up to Trump. What does Israel have to do with that? Unless these two are in complete lockstep, which of course they are. And then going back to the article, Trump responded that the U.S. wouldn't stand in the way, but emphasized that the U.S. military wouldn't assist with any offensive operations. So Trump gave Netanyahu the full green light. Yeah. And yes, now he says the U.S. won't assist for now. But what Israel is now going to try to do is do everything it can to get the U.S. involved. And it will do that by continuing to attack Iran's civilian infrastructure, which will force an Iranian retaliation. Israel's hoping, I think, Iran will hit U.S. military assets that are throughout the Middle East, because that's also something Iran has to contend with, the fact that its adversary has military bases surrounding it. And that puts it in a very tough position. And what Israel will try to do is use that to its advantage and try to get Iran to retaliate against a U.S. military installation. And it has many, and there's many that it can hit. But this is the point here. Trump gave Netanyahu the full green light.
So basically, Israel just instrumentalized the U.S. and instrumentalized negotiations through Donald Trump, who has failed on every single diplomatic point so far, failed massively, disastrously in every area where he has leaned into supposed diplomacy, along with his golf buddy, Steve Witkoff. They used Trump and created an atmosphere of deception by convincing Iran that this was going to take place, this meeting would take place on Sunday, and that it didn't need to make immediate preparations. Although war was in the air, IRGC commander Hossam Salameh, who was later killed on Friday, was actually warning that Iran had its finger on the trigger, that it had powerful warheads, and that this would be disastrous for Israel. But they obviously didn't prepare enough. And now here, since we've jumped ahead a little bit from the Israeli attack into the political dimensions, but I think it's important context, is Amit Segal, who is one of the biggest mouthpieces of Netanyahu at Channel 12. And he basically, I mean, we need to analyze this more carefully, but he's saying that the Trump administration was actually in on this perfidious act of using negotiations to deceive Iran and then launch this unprovoked decapitation attack to take out its military high command and top nuclear scientists. This is what Segal says from an Israeli source. And I would bet a large amount of Haktua and Trump meme coins that is Netanyahu speaking through Segal. So that's why I think this needs more analysis. We shouldn't accept it at face value. The attack on Iran was preceded by a deception operation that included media and diplomatic components, both internal and external, involving various actors. Israel succeeded in surprising Iran with psychological maneuvers. Now, I think it's pretty clear, and it's been corroborated by other sources, that the Israelis got Trump to pull back from statements threatening Iran with war, and asked him, or actually demanded, that he make overtures to diplomacy in the moments before the strike, and Trump acceded and did so, which kind of confirms what Segal through Netanyahu is saying here. But what else could be going on here is that Netanyahu, this is after the strike, is that Netanyahu is seeking to implicate Trump and the United States in order to bait Iran into attacking U.S. assets in order to draw the U.S. in more deeply than it already is. And I am not saying that the U.S. was not heavily involved in this. I'm just saying Netanyahu's dream is to get the U.S. to engage directly with Iran.
I think that's a great point. I initially took these reports from Israel at face value. You had all these Israeli officials saying anonymously that the Americans are basically in on it, that Trump was part of the deception. That was the message. But I think you're totally right here, that Israelis are so cynical that, and given that this has only come from the Israeli side so far, there hasn't been a U.S. source confirming that the U.S. actively took part in a deception operation, even though it does look like they did from the outset. I mean, how can you look at their actions and conclude something different? But I think it's fair to not rule out the possibility that this is exactly what you said it was. That Israel is trying to basically implicate Trump even more than he already is implicated in order to provoke Iran, to get Iran to attack the U.S., which would then draw the U.S. And I think that's a really important possibility to raise. And look, Netanyahu also, in his speech announcing the attack on Iran Thursday night, he went out of his way to thank Donald Trump.
I want to thank President Trump for his leadership in confronting Iran's nuclear weapons program. He has made clear time and again that Iran cannot have a nuclear enrichment program. Today, it is clear that Iran is just buying for time. It refuses to agree to this basic requirement of peaceful nations.
The requirement of peaceful nations who sign on to the non-proliferation treaty is that they have the right to peaceful enrichment for domestic civilian purposes. That's what Iran insists on the right to. Netanyahu is saying that Iran insisting on that right is trying to flout international law and go towards a nuclear weapon. So it's a total perversion of reality. But he went out of his way to thank Donald Trump, and he has every reason to thank Trump because Trump gave him the green light. And I agree that fully he also could be trying to provoke Iran to go after U.S. assets so Trump could help out Netanyahu even more than he already has by being a direct participant in this war on Iran.
Definitely. And we have an even better show than I expected. We not only have one surprise guest coming, but we have a second surprise guest from Tehran who has managed to break through various layers of that prevent StreamYard from being accessible there. StreamYard was down the other day. It was very weird. It was like, you know, Judge Napolitano was going to disrupt Israeli plans. So I don't know, Ehsan, give us a thumbs up when you're ready. If you can hear me. Okay, 1 second. So the attack begins, and you know, I think a lot of people who are accepting the Israeli propaganda, which it draws on truth about Trump's real role here and the Trump administration's real role. I think a lot of people are refusing to accept that Trump could be this stupid, that he could just be so stupid that he would actually believe that he could green light this Israeli regime change war, and then Iran's foreign ministry and its negotiating team would come back to Oman and continue negotiating because they're so afraid and terrified of these powerful US weapons. I think Trump really thinks that. He said so. He said, we hope that we can reinitiate negotiations. Where's the Matt Gaetz statement? Oh, here it is. I mean, this is the level of, we lost Ehsan. This is the level of stupidity that prevails in Trump world. And this is supposed to be like the wise Vance faction of restrainers. Trump so clearly wants peace, says Matt Gaetz. And so here's Trump's statement. You know, I gave Iran chance after chance, blah, blah, blah. Now they're all getting killed and they must make a deal. He thinks that they're intimidated and that they're not going to be able to hit back. You know, certainly Iran's hardliners spoke bravely. He never really learned to write properly at a high school level, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now and it will get worse. But now he's saying that he's also saying they should come back to the negotiating table and Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. And Iran is obviously, and Gaetz framing this as some kind of call for peace just shows how delusional they are. Iran has written off negotiations. Why should they negotiate when Israel has murdered their top negotiator, Ali Shamikhani? And this is that negotiator who operates directly under Iran's leader and negotiates on his behalf. He's one of many negotiators and many advisors to the leader. This is him in an interview with Richard Engel in late May.
Yes, we are ready.
Shamkhani is one of the few people in Iran authorized to speak about the sensitive negotiations.
We
can definitely have better relations with the U.S.
Shamkhani said that Iran is willing to commit to never having a nuclear weapon, to getting rid of its stockpiles of highly enriched uranium, to only enriching to a level needed for civilian use, and to allow inspectors in to oversee it all, in exchange for lifting all sanctions immediately. He said Iran would accept that deal tonight.
So, I mean, that was what all the negotiators, those close to the negotiations I spoke to in Tehran, said as well. On background, Iran will abide by its obligations under the NPT, but they want a civilian nuclear program, and Israel would not accept that. So they killed him. They murdered him deliberately. Israel murdered every Hamas negotiator, every negotiator who was dealing with outside of Qatar. They can't assassinate people in Qatar. Every Hamas negotiator, starting with Salah Arori in his office in Beirut, a political figure whose name was on all negotiation deals post-October 7th. And it culminated with the killing of Hania in Tehran in his hotel while he was at the new president's inauguration after the strangely timed death of Ibrahim Raisi. So they killed a negotiator, and then Trump says, come back to the table. I green lighted that attack on that guy who is agreeing to major compromises, major sacrifices. And this is where Trump still is. So I think that, it's time that we conclude a few things. First of all, this is not an America First war. America First is dead. MAGA was always a branding campaign to just bring angry white people back into the fold of the corporate neocon run Republican Party, using Buchananite language and invoking Pat Buchanan's 1992 culture war speech to just basically dupe angry white men to go back into the duopoly after they got screwed again and again. And now here we are about to fight a war on behalf of Israel, authorized by the king, the cult leader of MAGA. It's dead. The second thing we have to acknowledge is Trump is functionally retarded and we cannot be attributing 5D chess to Donald Trump anymore. His negotiations on Gaza were a scam that just allowed Israel to remobilize for another stage of the Holocaust. His negotiations with Russia have completely failed. And his negotiations with Iran were at least used and instrumentalized by Netanyahu as a ruse. And in talking to some of the Iranian diplomats close to the negotiations, they wanted to ascribe some kind of motive to Trump that was rational and intelligent and trying to deduce what he was actually doing. And he actually didn't know what he was doing. And his team is just overwhelmed, has no idea what they're doing. And now Rubio, in his statement, is pleading with Iran not to attack U.S. assets and declaring that the U.S. had nothing to do with this. Well, if the U.S. is sharing intelligence and the U.S. is providing the diplomatic green light and diplomatic cover and weapons, and including the THAAD system and defending Israel, and it has THAAD operators inside Israel, the U.S. is involved. And this is all on Trump's back. So it's time to just wake up to reality here.
Yeah, Israel has been, the U.S. has been involved in helping to shoot down incoming Iranian drones and missiles. So the U.S. is totally involved, even if Trump says he won't take part in offensive operations yet against Iran. And you saw the contrast between the statement we played of Netanyahu and the Iranian negotiator who Netanyahu's government assassinated. Netanyahu said that Iran won't give up its quest for nuclear weapons. Iran says, we don't want a nuclear weapon. We just want the right to peacefully enrich, which they have under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And it's the U.S.-Israeli refusal to recognize that right that has led to this impasse, because Iran cannot agree to a surrender. That's what Trump was asking Iran to accept. That's what his quote-unquote 60-day deadline was all about. I do want to put this out there, though, and this is a critique from Scott Ritter that I think is interesting. And again, not my place to judge, because I don't know enough about Iran's capabilities, and they're in a really tough position. But Scott Ritter was critical of Iran in deciding to enrich far beyond what they needed at a peaceful level, going to 60% enrichment. Because Scott Ritter's critique is if you don't want a nuclear weapon anyway, why are you making yourself a threshold state? Because all you're doing by doing that is giving Israel an excuse to attack you by saying you are on the path to a nuclear weapon. So Ritter was saying, if you want peaceful enrichment, just keep it at the level of peaceful enrichment. Don't go beyond that. And so he thinks Iran made a very big mistake there.
In going beyond the level of peaceful.
Yeah.
Well, number one, the level of peaceful enrichment can go all the way up to 90%. And what is peaceful enrichment? Peaceful enrichment is enrichment to any level below weaponization under the NPT. So peaceful enrichment can go up to 60%, which is what I think you need for nuclear propulsion of a submarine. That is allowed. And this is not what it's about. It's not about the nuclear issue. As you said in the beginning, Aaron, this is about Iran being one of the only powerful countries left in the region, which is deterring Israeli aggression and expansionism. It's about Palestine, ultimately.
No, sure. Yeah. No one doubts that, of course. But the question is, why even give Israel something they can use as a, like, even though it's a fake pretext, the fact that Iran enriched at a much higher level than, for example, they would have under the Iran nuclear deal, which would put them on the path to a nuclear weapon, as opposed to being at 3.6%, which wouldn't. He's just saying that tactically, he doesn't see a point in that, and he thinks that it gave Israel an opening which it exploited. That's his critique, as far as I understand it, which I find interesting, at least, to consider whether they made a mistake there.
I mean, the mistake is just simply standing up to Israel and having a foreign policy having a foreign policy at all independent of the United States. That's the mistake. And Scott should know that.
Well, he does.
All the other countries. Egypt detaining and arresting international humanitarians who have come to protest Israel's Holocaust and get to Rafah on the Egyptian side. Jordan assisting the US in trying to repel Iran's counterattack, Iran's legitimate retaliation. Syria, where's Syria at right now? They're helping. I mean, they're allowing this to take place on their territory. This is what the whole thing was about. The Israeli Air Force has reportedly refueled at the US-controlled Al Tanf Air Base, and there's video of this in Syria, en route to strikes on Iran. Local FSA militia were instructed not to interfere. In other words, local NATO mercenary, Gulf mercenary militia were instructed not to interfere. Per sources, Ahmed al-Shara himself is said to have greenlit the use of Syrian territory. Where's Turkey? Turkey providing gas to Israel, deeply integrated into the financial infrastructure of Tel Aviv via Azerbaijan and elsewhere. Where are all of these countries, but especially Syria? I mean, they have all fallen. They were picked off one by one. They were bought off. The UAE and the Saudis are supplying Israel with oil and accepting mercenary bribes through the Abraham Accords and paying off ultra-Zionist members of Trump world, including Jared Kushner, through their sovereign wealth funds. And Iran stands alone. And so that's what this is about. I mean, let's keep this in context and stop debating over 3.67 versus 20% enrichment. Ultimately, Israel doesn't want to allow any enrichment at all, because this has always been about regime change. I probably lost our guest that I was hoping to host from Tehran, Ehsan Sefarnejad, who is a great analyst. Follow him on Twitter, but we'll get him, through a different platform. It's just very difficult to host anyone from Iran on StreamYard. We do have someone else with us who was with me in Iran, Ahmad Hussam, and if he can give me a thumbs up whenever he's ready, we can bring him on. He's not ready yet. Aaron, feel free to chime in. We haven't really even addressed the Israeli attacks directly. The attacks took out major IRGC commanders, Hossam Salameh, Mohammad Bagheri. These are household names in Iran who were heroes for Iranians in their 8-year war with Iraq. I actually visited the grave of Mohammad Bagheri's brother at the Behesht-e-Zahra Martyrs Cemetery in Tehran. As I walked through it with Professor Mohammad Marandi, just kind of came across his grave. I mean, these are figures that are, considered heroes. And they were killed. Many of them were killed in civilian areas. They were not prepared, it appears, for this assault. It was clearly a major tactical error to allow them to be exposed this much. But Israel began attacking civilian areas intensely. And it revived terrible traumatic memories for Iranians of the war of cities that Saddam Hussein initiated with attacks on Iranian civilian centers. And Iranians now get the sense that they're being targeted as civilians. I can read you a message I just received from a friend in central Tehran, which, is horrifying. Last night, Israel started striking our neighborhood all throughout the night, and the gap between the strikes was 5 to 10 minutes, and each strike took 2 to 3 minutes. It was horrible. We could hear drones before the air defense hit them, and every time the whole building seemed to be shaking. This is, that's what I experienced in Gaza when Israel was striking Gaza, what everyone is experiencing in Gaza. And Israel is trying to Gazify Iran right now. And what it has led to, as Professor Fouad Izzadi explained to me, I really recommend my interview with him, which is over at our YouTube channel, is a rallying around the flag effect, where even people with serious grievances with the Islamic Republic and the current government are rallying around just Iranian nationalism and the sense that they are being attacked as Iranians, regardless of their views. And so this is what Israel has unleashed. Ahmed, are you ready now? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, here we go. So Ahmed Hussam is the founder and creator of Propaganda and Company. We did the documentary Atrocity Incorporated together on Israel's deceptions, on October 7th deceptions, and the corporate U.S. media's role. And you all might, many of you probably know him from his role as a content creator, anti-Israel influencer. That was a joke.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great sound.
Your sound is horrible, Ahmed. Do you have a microphone?
I'm using my AirPods. Should I switch to the laptop?
All right, that's not actually that
bad.
It's
getting better.
It's getting better. Okay.
I think
is it better now with noise canceling?
Yeah,
yeah, that's good.
Okay.
All right. So your thoughts. What were your thoughts initially when Israel attacked Iran? I mean, it was kind of a shocking moment that many commanders could be exposed, along with 9 top-level nuclear scientists.
Yeah, I was very concerned at first, just because of the extent of it. Not only taking out that many commanders, Iran has always said that they're building their deterrence and their strength not on the backs of one person, but an entire system. And so after Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, for example, they would have others to step up and replace them. So human talent, of course, is important, but Iran is a massive country, and they're, I'm sure, training many different generals and many different nuclear scientists. We went to Iran, and as you know, they have a large pool of potential scientists that are up and coming, and there are interviews with people who have been assassinated. And they've previously said that, if I'm killed, I've lived a long life and I've trained those, underneath me. And so they'll take my place. So it's still important, but it's not the worst thing in the world that high-level officials are killed or scientists are killed. They can be replaced. But what isn't easily replaceable are air defenses, radars, things that take time and money and sophistication to build. And so at first I was very concerned that the Mossad was able to use their drones and different methods to attack and destroy these systems. And it seemed like Israeli fighter jets were flying, over Irani airspace. And so I was concerned to see that. But it seems like now there's evidence that, Iran has improved their situation. They've apparently shot down 3 F-35s, which is massive because, from my knowledge, an F-35 has never been shot down before. And so to shoot down 3 in one day is significant. So it seems to me, based on the information that I have access to, that Iran's air defenses are actually working. And the footage that we're seeing of, Iranis watching and celebrating the active usage of their air defenses, it seems like those are like drones that are being shot down out of the sky. So right now it seems like they're in a better situation. So I do feel a little better.
It looked, first of all, on the F-35s, if this Mahmoud Pezeshkian, the Iranian president, has stated that Iran has shot down at least 1 F-35. There are rumors that a pilot was captured I've seen some say a female pilot was captured. If this is true, this would be the first time a 5th generation F-35 has been taken down. Iran's air defenses are mostly domestically produced. I mean, it has S-300s from Russia, but this would be a colossal waste of US hardware, and it would have a deterrent effect. But I haven't seen the confirmation. I've seen like AI generated images of F-35s, but I haven't seen any confirmation. It looks as if Iran, and this is what the Mossad is saying, was heavily penetrated.
Yeah, you're right to question the validity of the claim. Obviously, we're in an information war, and there's going to be a lot of propaganda from both sides. There's no doubt about that fact. I also have not seen any evidence of wreckage. If they had shot it down, you would imagine they would be showing that everywhere. The IDF, from their official Twitter account, posted today that they control the airspace with full superiority, they claimed, over Western Irani airspace all the way up to Tehran. So if that's true, we'll see evidence of it soon. But Iran also claims that to potentially have shot down 3 of them and captured a pilot. There was video footage, and I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but there was video footage of a pilot ejecting. But is that real? That's the first question. The second question is, was it an F-35? It could have been an F-16 or another type of fighter jet. And so we'll see. But definitely a good call to question what we're seeing.
And what do you make of this claim from Israel that they basically built a secret drone base that the Mossad did inside of Iran, which it used to take out air defenses, take out other military assets, and I think also played a part in these assassinations? And they released some video of that, showing these Mossad, or alleged Mossad operatives operating inside of Iran, manning these drones.
I think it's very concerning. It wouldn't surprise me. We saw Ukraine pull off, a very sophisticated drone operation to attack Russian strategic bombers, and so it's not the biggest surprise in the world. I don't know if they actually had a drone base inside of Iran. That is what they claim. It would make sense. It's easier to maybe smuggle components and then assemble it together. It's not too difficult. A lot of these drones are actually 3D printed these days. So it would make sense that you would smuggle the components separately and then assemble them together and then operate them. But I saw today that there are 2 bases that they're operating these drones out of. One is in Kurdistan, so probably in the Erbil region. Erbil is the capital of in the northern Iraq. The Kurdish regional government, the capital is Erbil. And so they apparently have a drone base there. And from what I understand, Iran may have even attacked in that area. And then they have another one supposedly coming out of Azerbaijan, which, as you know, is a close ally with Israel, and they coordinate very closely. It was the Iranian president and the foreign minister last year returning from Azerbaijan that died in mysterious circumstances. Many people claim that they were assassinated by the Mossad. People in Iran told me that. They believe that's the case, but no one wants to talk about it. And they feel like things have gone downhill since then. So yeah, there's the potential, definitely, one, that they could have a base in Iran, but also that they're just operating these drone bases outside in Kurdistan and in Azerbaijan.
We're speaking to Ahmad Hussam from my basement, who's in Iran with me. You hosted Scott Ritter in Tampa, and Aaron had raised a point Scott made, and I wanted to get your response to it. Aaron, you want to repeat the point? And
well, Scott's point is that if Iran does not want a nuclear weapon, then why even flirt with it? Because what they've done recently, since Trump broke the Iran deal, is massively increased enrichment to make themselves a nuclear threshold, or put them on the path to being a nuclear threshold state, where they're a lot closer to it than they would be under, say, the terms of the Iran deal. And Scott's point was, like, if you don't want a nuclear weapon anyway, and Scott says you shouldn't pursue one, because if you do pursue a nuclear weapon, the U.S. will use nuclear weapons against you. So he disagrees, for example, with John Mearsheimer, who says that it'd be better for everybody if Iran did have a nuclear weapon, because that would be a deterrent. Whereas Scott says if Iran even tried that, they get nuked by the U.S. So Iran shouldn't do that. But so Scott's argument is, given you're not going to go for a nuclear weapon, why even flirt with the possibility of acquiring one? Like, why have an enrichment program where you're moving towards one, where you're putting yourself in a position where you can get one, given that, going far beyond your peaceful enrichment needs gives Israel a pretext to go ahead and say you're a threat to their security. We can't let possibly Iran go any further than this. We have to attack. So he's saying Iran made a tactical error there by increasing its levels of enrichment, as I understand his argument.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's two parts to the question. One, should Iran make a nuclear weapon? And if so, would the US destroy them for that? And then the second one is why increase their enrichment? So firstly, I'll say that Scott Ritter is an expert. He has many decades of experience. I'm just a content creator pleb sharing my opinion. So I'll tell you what I think. But one, I think there's validity to what he's saying. It's a valid concern. And I've actually shared the clip from our podcast discussion together where he goes into detail about why it's a bad idea. And I don't think it's the worst take. I think, there's a lot of validity to it. The thing is, Iran is under attack now. They're being bombed now. Their IRGC generals are being killed now, and there is no nuclear weapon. So the US is already at war with Israel. There's no way Israel could have done any of this without, one, their knowledge. And now we're seeing reports from Axios and also Trump boasting that he did know. So this is an American war on Iran. So that's different, obviously. It could be worse if the US were to give everything it's got. Obviously, they could wipe Iran from the earth. But Mearsheimer and others, and also Hillary Clinton in her leaked emails, State Department, when they're discussing Syria, the biggest fear they have, according to her, and she claims she heard this from the Israelis themselves, their biggest nightmare is Iran gets a nuclear weapon. Why? Because Saudi Arabia will get one, and Egypt will get one, and Turkey will get one. Suddenly, the nuclear monopoly in the Middle East, it no longer belongs to Israel. Now everyone has it. And can you imagine this genocide taking place in the context of everyone in the region having nuclear weapons? Can you imagine if Israel believed that Iran had a nuclear weapon? Can you imagine them actually taking these aggressive actions and assassinating generals? They just struck Tel Aviv last night, dozens of times. There's nothing their air defenses can do to stop their most sophisticated missiles. If there's a nuclear weapon, even if the United States were threatening to destroy them, Iran would destroy Israel. And that's the entire point. Now, will they actually do it? That's the question. But the whole point of having that capability creates that fear, which creates the deterrence. So do I think they should have a nuclear weapon? Yes. Now, would the US destroy them for that? Maybe. That's a valid concern from Scott. The other part of the question that you're talking about, why increase enrichment? I think for two reasons. One, it's obviously like a political tool. It's a negotiating chip. So, hey, if you don't honor the 3% agreement we had with Obama, then we'll keep enriching. And they did so gradually over the years. They have these advanced centrifuges, the IR6 or whatever they call it. They could have been at 90% a long time ago. They've been taking their time. Obviously, they don't want to do it, but they're demonstrating that they could. And honestly, they should, because if your fear is that we have a nuclear weapon and you're going to try to destroy us because before we can get there, then we should at least be prepared to get there just in case. If you're going to destroy us, we should at least have the ingredients and quickly assemble it together like a chef in the kitchen if we need to. Iran has demonstrated already through the agreement with the JCPOA with Obama and all the years of trying to negotiate that they don't want this situation, but it's being forced upon them. I've said from the beginning that, and I'll end with this, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what they should do, but if I'm going to go down, I might as well go down fighting as hard as I can. So I might as well have everything I need in order to do so.
I completely agree. They're in such a difficult position where they're dealing with two pathological hegemons who only care about destroying any deterrent to their aggression. That's all Israel and the US are guided by. They don't care about security, peace, democracy, freedom, nothing. All they care about is destroying anything that can deter their aggression. And Iran is surrounded, as we were talking about this a bit earlier, they're surrounded by US military assets. All these Gulf countries are in the pocket of the US, and the US has military bases there, troops everywhere. What do you do in that situation? I do not claim to know the answer. I just thought some of these questions that Scott posed were worth exploring. But
absolutely, they are. I mean, it's a valid concern. Yeah. It's a very valid concern. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. They're under attack now. So
I think that ship has sailed. The reformist government that's in power now wanted a deal and would have gone below that threshold under the deal, because the desire among the Iranian public for sanctions relief is so strong. I mean, that's something that we both saw there, is that people are just being crushed under the weight of Western generated inflation. And so they would have been popular if they'd gotten real sanctions relief, the kind that never came after the JCPOA. But look what Israel did. Killed the top negotiator. It deliberately destroyed negotiations, which Trump allowed it to happen and is obviously a participant. So the ship has sailed. I think the next move should be, logically, that Iran leaves the NPT. Under international law, it is legal for them to have a nuclear weapon or many nuclear weapons under the NPT. It is also legitimate for them
under the
not under the NPT, after leaving the NPT.
Sorry. After leaving, right. Yeah.
I was like moving ahead mentally to my next point.
There's a lot to process right now.
Yeah, which is DEMONA and the IAEA. I mean, since we're on the nuclear issue, let's talk about the IAEA. But there's the DEMONA supposedly secret reactor in the Negev desert in Israel, which was struck by Iranian ballistic missiles supposedly last night or yesterday. And Iran has consistently called for the Middle East and the region to be nuclear free. This is a great position. And one of the points they were putting forward in negotiations with the US is that Israel should dismantle its DEMONA secret reactor, which the IAEA never inspects, as a condition for Iran going below the nuclear threshold. And obviously that was not something that the Trump administration was willing to accept. So the IAEA's Rafael Grossi, Secretary General, has been asked about this very point. Why is Israel allowed to have a secret nuclear program while you're constantly making these demands of Iran? Israel doesn't. And he said, well, Israel just doesn't abide by the NPT, so we have no ability to inspect any reactor other than their Sorek civilian reactor.
Right.
And so Iran claims to have obtained this, or enacted a intelligence masterstroke. That's how an IRGC general put it. Thousands and thousands of files were spirited out of the Sorek reactor, which pertained to Mossad activities, even Netanyahu's health, secret Israeli agents, but mainly to Israel's nuclear program. And it showed collusion between the IAEA, its Secretary General, and Israeli officials, secret collusion. Here's some of those documents. This is Meraz Zafari Odiz. She was Israel's official representative to the IAEA. These are the only documents Iran has leaked so far.
Yeah.
Between 2014 and 2016, she was Israel's IAEA rep. This was during the JCPOA period. But an interesting thing happened. Yukiya Amano was the Secretary General of the IAEA at this period, and Israel hated him. Considered him to be just too neutral. Amano developed a strange illness in late 2018 and then died in June 2019. And during that period, there was a lot of jockeying behind the scenes for leadership positions. And Grossi emerged as the front runner because he was positioning himself as the biggest tool of the US. And these documents show that he was secretly meeting with Meirav Zafari Odiz. I mean, here's an email where this is her. Here's a panel she did. Here's her email to Grossi while he was jockeying or vying for the position of Secretary General. And she's saying, in the event of previous agreement between Israel and the National Suppliers Group, he was the head of the NSG at the IAEA. I would like to request a meeting with you as soon as possible in your capacity as chairman in order to discuss Israel's relations with the group, blah, blah, blah. She wants to influence him. I mean, this was never publicly known, but what is publicly known is he always goes to Israel first before making any demand of Iran. What is publicly known is that he introduced a resolution declaring Iran to be in violation of the NPT pretty much hours before Israel's well-prepared strike. And so the resolution appears choreographed, not only because of the timing, but because of the contents. If you read the contents, it contains recycled allegations dating back like to 2003 and 2018, which are based on Israeli fabrications. Gareth Porter, who is an expert on this issue, has demonstrated these fabrications at the Grayzone and elsewhere in his books. Why are they just recycling this days before an Israeli attack? So
Yeah. I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you what I think. What I think is, because now I think the governing body has like 6 weeks to decide whether they want to implement these snapback sanctions and have the UN add more sanctions to Iran at a time when they're already sanctioned to hell and back. So they're initiating this war. And a month from now, if this continues, additional sanctions will be placed. So they're trying to start a war where Iran has to spend a ton of money on defense and then apply the final strangling and put them in a position where they're literally going to implode economically. And like you said, we went to Iran, we saw it for ourselves. While it is self-sustainable, they have everything they need. Their people are eating, they have mass transportation, etc. They're not in debt like many people in America. So I would argue actually their life isn't too bad. But they're definitely, if you speak to Iranis, they tell you straight up, our life is not good. We want the sanction relief. They're never going to get it. And they're going to add this final noose around the neck of Iran at a time where they're already at their most vulnerable, which is why all of this is happening. They say it publicly all the time. Israeli officials, war hawks in the United States, they all say Iran has never been more vulnerable. And it's not just because the Axis has taken many blows since October 7th. It's because their GDP has been slashed by 50% because of these sanctions in the last 10 years. And Trump, one of the first things he appointed the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to do was to increase those sanctions by like 100%. So they want to eliminate 9/10 of all of their ability to export and sell oil. I don't know if it'll work, but the point is the walls are closing in. And their whole objective is to flip the government, and they're putting them they're asking them to fight at their most vulnerable time. And that's why Iran has been hesitant all these years, which is why I think they really Iran is fighting a losing battle, and every day they lose ground. They're running out of time. So they need to do what they can to establish deterrence now. And if they don't, then I think they're just fighting on their terms, Israel and the West. So that's what I think this is about. With hours before, it's just to trigger, these new sanctions at a time where they're most vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a consensus in Iran that True Promise 3 was executed too late.
Yeah, absolutely.
That the reformist government went into negotiations in good faith, which was also probably a mistake, and that they're playing the West's game and not dictating the tempo and momentum. And perhaps there would have been an opportunity after October 7th to do that in tandem with Hezbollah before it lost a lot of its missile stocks and Israeli strikes. But now Israel's been able to pick every member of the Axis off one by one, except Yemen. Syria has collapsed and fallen into the hands of basically, a government that has said that it has shared interests with Israel.
Yeah. Shared enemies.
Sorry, shared enemies.
Yeah.
Meaning Iran.
Exactly.
And so Israel's chosen this moment when Iran is essentially alone. Hezbollah cannot join in the attack. So what will it take? I mean, that's the question. What will it take to reestablish deterrence? I mean, Iran has hit Hakiria, which is the main central Sauron-like node of Israel's Holocaust in Gaza and its war machine across the board. This is the Israeli Defense Ministry nestled within the heart of civilian Tel Aviv, surrounded by human shields. And Israel has struck Hakiria. I mean, this is kind of historic. Here's a Fox News report.
Has been up all night, is standing by with all the details. Trey, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Laura, following that Israeli attack against Iranian nuclear facilities and top IRGC leadership overnight and into today, the Iranians have responded with 3 waves of ballistic missiles. This is Israel's version of the Pentagon, the Kiryat. And the building on this compound was just hit.
Please go back. Go back, please. Go back, please.
You can understand here, it's very tense at this specific location because the Iranians are now targeting the defense establishment of Israel. And so I'm going to have my cameraman pan up here to this building just across the street from the Kiryat. And so
you can see there, the soldiers are trying to censor Fox News's Trey Yingst.
Yeah.
Because they're humiliated. Number one, they don't want to show that Iran is targeting military assets.
Yeah.
Number two, they don't want to show this historic strike, which has hit their defense ministry because it's humiliating. What will it take to establish deterrence for Iran?
Okay, again, this is just my personal speculation as a content creator and a pleb sharing his opinion. So, but I'll say that, you know, I have to imagine that just like Netanyahu took off on a plane and left to Greece reportedly when this started, I have to imagine that they removed important people and assets from this building. I think this was like a performative strike from Iran, and I don't think it goes far enough, and it should have happened back in October or November. They delayed. This is many months late. And I think the reason why Iran has been hesitating is because they aren't as powerful as we've been led to believe. And this is what Israel and the United States think. And that's why they want to strike, because they understand. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic or put fear in anyone's heart, but, you know, we just have to be realistic. And I think if Iran had more powerful capabilities, they would have demonstrated it, and they're not doing so because they can't. So they keep talking about international law and UN rights and restraint, and we don't want a nuclear weapon because we believe in human life and blah, blah, blah. It's because they don't have it. They're not ready. And while their missiles are powerful, like when we got the tour of the Aerospace Museum, they told us what you're seeing here, you know, is what we're allowing you to see. We have secret things you haven't said before, and we've just made updates. Like the general who presented, he did a presentation. He said, you know, the previous rocket was like 10 meters accurate. This one is 3 meters. So within 9 feet of accuracy, which is very impressive. But if they just developed that kind of accuracy and power, and these other rockets are just a couple of years old, do they have hundreds of thousands of them? I don't know. I don't think so. They haven't had enough time. And also their GDP has been slashed. They don't have the money. So they have these rockets, but just like Hezbollah, when we were told they had 150,000 rockets or 1 million rockets, and all we kept seeing for the majority of the war were these unguided rockets that could only travel like 12 miles, and most of them were from like the Iraq-Iran war in the 80s. They weren't that sophisticated whatsoever. So Iran has powerful missiles. Do they have hundreds of thousands of them? Because if they don't, then they don't have the ability to go wave for wave for wave for months and months and months. So if that's the case, and you have a limited ability to precisely enter Israeli airspace, then the only thing in my mind, and this is what's driving Scott Ritter crazy, is you need to put a nuclear warhead on that precise missile and demonstrate that you have it, and make clear that you have 10 to 20 of these. So if you want to attack us and nuke our cities, we will remove Israel from the face of the earth. I'm not advocating for nuclear war. I'm not advocating for civilian death, but we are seeing a genocide where this Israeli state, the majority of the population are saying Israel isn't going far enough. Okay, this is a fascist, basically a Nazi state. These people are genocidal. They are way too comfortable because they have been able to kill civilians left and right and destroy any military and produce regime change all over the region without any consequences. They need to see a nuclear explosion and a mushroom cloud and understand that Iran can put 10 of them immediately, anytime they want. And I think that will reestablish deterrence. Fear, that's it.
You know, just speaking of Scott Ritter, I spoke to him yesterday, and he thinks that actually Israel's arsenal of missiles is not as large as people think. He thinks
their nuclear arsenal?
Nuclear arsenal, no, obviously, but short of nuclear weapons, that their missiles are actually in short supply. Perhaps partly because of the proxy war in Ukraine, but he thinks Iran. If I understood him correctly, he doesn't think that Iran faces a shortage comparatively when it comes to Israel. That's what I got from him. But just a minor point, you know, going back to when Iran should have gotten involved, the fact that they took so long to get involved, it just underscores what a complete lie it is that Israel and the U.S. have told that Iran was behind October 7th. If Iran was somehow involved on October 7th, they would have been involved from the start.
They would have been ready.
Yeah, they've been ready. But this totally caught them off guard. So that for Israel to continue to, I mean, first of all, it's a fake pretext to begin with. Just because an occupied people resist you, it doesn't give you the right to actually fire a single bullet anywhere. They just end their occupation of Gaza. But for Israel to talk about October 7th still, and that's why they have to defend themselves from Iran, it's fake for so many reasons, including that the fact that Iran took so long to respond just underscores that they weren't involved at all. And same with Hezbollah. But yeah, I wonder if when Hezbollah got involved, what Iran was thinking back then, what would be the result of them not getting involved as well, because the result was it one by, as you guys talked about it, one by one, Israel has sort of picked off or at least weakened its adversaries and is now focusing on the biggest one.
Yeah, it was obviously a huge mistake. And Hezbollah, like, I think it was obvious what they were trying to do. Hassan Nasrallah wanted to show solidarity, but they had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Literally, they were on the border, taking out border cameras and things of that nature. And that was nice. And they did empty the north. But Israel didn't empty the north because they were afraid of their rockets. They thought Hezbollah was going to carry out a hostage capture just like Hamas did. So they wanted everyone as far away from the north as possible, so Hezbollah couldn't do that. They probably should have done that in hindsight, but they didn't. And they just were harassing the border, and they didn't escalate soon enough. And then before they knew it, Hassan Nasrallah and their entire leadership were killed, and Beirut got pummeled, and Iran didn't get involved soon enough. And so they allowed the war to move off of Israel's borders, and now it's in Tehran. It was a huge mistake, but that's hindsight. 2020, it's over now. That can't be changed. What can be changed, in my opinion, really, is reestablishing deterrence through a mushroom cloud. I'm not saying drop it on people. I'm saying test it, make it. We have it. You guys see it. Mess with us further, and that you're going to see that cloud in Tel Aviv.
Well, that's it's a very ambitious goal when a country has been under so much nuclear surveillance. Now its nuclear facilities are under attack. There's a lot of debate on how much damage Israel managed to exact on Natanz as well as Fordo, which Fordo is the most reinforced nuclear bunker where a weapon would presumably be produced. Natanz also has an underground facility, and the facility above ground seems to have been hit pretty hard, but the underground facility reportedly has not been damaged, nor has Fordo's. This is, coming out now. Here's Michael Oren, who is a Israeli legislator, ex-American Zionist propagandist, who's a, fairly well-informed figure in Israel who would, I think he's in the opposition, I think, but, sort of in the center of Israeli politics. But you can sense from him a little bit of anxiety about where things are going. He says there's tremendous admiration for our armed forces, but this country is at the tail end of 20 months of war. Pain, exhaustion, and uncertainty define Israeli society right now, and we'll have to hold out for who knows long. So, Israel obviously is not able to withstand the kind of punishment populations in the region have become accustomed to from Israel. Its population demands a first world European lifestyle in the heart of an area that they consider to be barbaric. If that changes, there could be a level of deterrence established without a mushroom cloud. And there are some indications that without the kind of U.S. assistance that Netanyahu is demanding, that they could kind of be left out on their own a little bit here. It really is a question of how many ballistic missiles Iran has, how long it's able to sustain the tempo.
Right.
Israel's announced, the IDF has announced that it's expecting a new wave Saturday night of missiles. Yeah. And you look at the Israeli reactions, this is something like people in Gaza have been experiencing again and again. But the reaction from the beginning is so much more stoic. And this guy who sounds like a Eurotrash trance DJ. Well, I'm not even getting the sound. Start over. It always starts with that.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Yo!
Yo!
אני בהלם. Yo. אני בשוק.
Yo. That's her favorite thing to say. Yo.
אני fucking בשוק.
Yo. That was like the most Israeli reaction ever. Yo. Okay. Ani shok. Someone should remix that. There should be an EDM remix of that.
Yeah, he can't believe it. I thought we were untouchable. That's his reaction, basically, the translation. I didn't know this was possible. I don't advocate. I'm not celebrating violence or advocating for civilians to be in danger or be killed. Absolutely not. But these people need to experience pain and suffering. Otherwise, they just export that everywhere. Like last night, people in Gaza got some relief, much needed relief. They're looking up in the sky and they're joyful, not because they want to see other people die, but because it's not them being blown up. That reaction needs to be all over the country.
Well,
in order to stop them.
They also continued to be slaughtered in Gaza. However, the Israeli military has downgraded Gaza now to a second-level conflict, and because it has to reappropriate resources to Iran.
Right. And also because their famine is doing the job for them. Like they already have their plan of starving people to death, forcing them to the south. And eventually they'll have their ISIS goons, their PA intelligence affiliated goons help dump them into Egypt. So their Gaza plan is already well completed, and it's just a matter of making the decision.
So really important to stress that the massacres in Gaza are continuing, and they're continuing against people as they're trying to seek aid from the fake Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the Israeli intelligence front, that pretty much every day uses this fake aid distribution to kill people. And there was another one just in recent hours. I mean, and the atrocities are so many that it's impossible to keep track of all of them, but that is continuing. I want to read you guys something from David Ignatius of the Washington Post, just to give people an idea of the kind of propaganda we're going to be facing over this next period as warmongers try to manufacture consent for the U.S. getting even more directly involved in attacking Iran than it already is. This is from David Ignatius of the Washington Post, and this is what he writes. This is just out of the Iraq WMD playbook, literally. Iran has other means to hit back. One that has received little attention is Iran's relationship with al-Qaeda affiliates. According to former U.S. counterterrorism officials, Tehran has built good relations with the new de facto al-Qaeda emir, Saif al-Adel, who took over in 2023 after Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed. These former officials say Adel helped manage WMD planning for Osama bin Laden. The al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen might pose a special danger. It's headed by someone who's posted a chilling video this month threatening U.S. officials. So this is literally the Iraq WMD playbook, where we're going to now accuse Iran, which has fought al-Qaeda for a very, very long time, especially inside Syria. Iran now of being in league with al-Qaeda.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're going to say whatever they need to in order to demonize Iran and justify what else they want to do, right?
This is a statement that just came out, reported by Trey Yingst, who blocked me because I exposed him for participating in the Al-Shifa hospital scam, along with Jonathan Conricus, the Israeli army propagandist who puts the con in Conricus. And now Conricus is furious at Trey Yingst because Yingst has started to become kind of a straight shooter and actually report the news.
Well, I don't know if you remember, shortly after October 7th, he had a Clarissa Ward-like performance. I don't know if you recall that, where they supposedly found a Hamas militant, and he was like, we're getting this on camera. They just captured him. And then a couple seconds later, the same guy they supposedly captured is coming back up and changing his clothes. So
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, a choreographed Clarissa Ward type performance, and yet people keep, presenting Trey Yingst. He blocked me as well, as if he's like this, straight edge journalist who's just trying to do the right thing. I think he's trying to repair his image.
Definitely. Yeah, he's in Operation Damage Control here because he wants to be back on the side of people outside of the Zionist death cult, which is narrowing. Here's what he says, though. I mean, it's basically sourcing Israeli officials who talk to Fox News. Israeli officials believe the conflict with Iran could be finished in days if our operations continue at this pace. I think we can finish it in days. It's a good thing that we have the U.S. by our side, said a senior Israeli intelligence official. The next few days are expected to be intense, with ongoing missile barrages from Iran and extensive Israeli strikes against various locations in Iran. Israel's home command has also announced missile barrages from Iran have just been initiated. So this looks like, I mean, not making any predictions, but it looks like Israel is using its U.S. media to kind of set a very short time frame. But at the same time, Netanyahu has said this could go on for weeks. And if Iran manages to achieve more results, I think in what's like emerging as a war of cities, a new war of cities, lots of casualties, for example, which Jewish Israelis are just not able to withstand, then I think that could extend the war. And Israel has breadth, not depth. It cannot go for it cannot drag a war out like this for very long with Netanyahu in such a politically precarious situation. So I think they would like to wrap this up and claim that they have taken out more high-level IRGC commanders and claim that they took out nuclear facilities. But it's very interesting to me that they're already kind of setting such a short time frame.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how they've been trying to sell this war from the beginning, that this isn't going to drag U.S. troops in. It would just be a quick, like, 10-hour bombing run, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to just assume it's propaganda. I mean, Israel has proven, that they're resourceful and they're creative and they're backed by the most powerful empire. I don't know how Ritter could suggest that their missiles are limited. I mean, they've been bombing Gaza relentlessly. They'll get whatever they want from Trump and the United States. And, people have been saying for years, Ukraine is running out of artillery. Ukraine is running out of artillery. And yeah, they have a shortage, but they're still fighting after all these years. And it's because the West can just keep giving them and giving them and giving them. So I don't want to make it seem like they're invincible, but they have a lot going for them. And so, I don't, it could be nonsense, but there could be some validity there.
I mean, it's impossible to make this assessment. I would rather ask an Iranian with better connections, who's better sourced within the establishment. But it's always tough to get a candid answer as well. What would it take for Israel to achieve its ultimate objective of regime change and putting in the new clown Shah, the fail son, to sell off the country to Israel in the West and initiate some gigantic region-wide Abraham Accords? I mean, what would it actually take? We walked the streets of Iran. I spoke to people from all backgrounds, partly because everybody wanted to talk to me in the street. And there was a lot of discontent, but it's the same kind of discontent I get in the US with the government. I mean, everyone has some harsh critique of the government or some kind of grievance of the economy. One group of people I talked to said they wanted the Shah back, but they were getting all their news, they told me, from Iran International. But that was sort of an outlier. People just want some economic relief. And a lot of the harsh criticism I would hear of the government would come from people who are supportive of the Islamic Republic and supportive of the revolution and very proud of Iran's foreign policy. So what would it actually take? And, I think just it would take some color revolution. And you can see with Netanyahu's message, he delivered a message to Iranians, which Jake Tapper played promptly as soon as Netanyahu rolled it out on CNN, and probably went out on CNN International. But Jake Tapper was like, Netanyahu coming up. Netanyahu has a message for the Iranian people. Like, it's some important thing to play. And then you can see the lower level propagandists. What's that lady with the German name who looks so indigenous to the region? Emily Schrader. She just delivered a message to Iranians. They're all putting out these messages because I think they're recognizing regime change might not come through a military solution. It's going to have to come from below.
Yeah. Well,
they're going to keep bombing civilian sites. Like, they've started attacking the gas fields today. The aim of this, I mean, so much of the discontent you heard, a lot of it is, not entirely, but a lot of it is fueled by the sanctions that are designed to make life miserable for ordinary people. That's, Max, you had the article a few years ago reviewing Richard Nephew's book, a former U.S. official who helped design the sanctions, and he bragged about how his whole job was to make life miserable for ordinary civilians.
He actually said one of his greatest achievements was reducing the amount of chicken available on Nowruz.
There you go, a holiday, right? A major holiday in Iran, and he even also admitted that the goal was to make ordinary civilians feel the pain, not even Iranian elites who can still afford to like buy the things they need. He said the goal was that basically the policies targeted ordinary people. So they're going to deepen that by attacking civilian infrastructure. And who knows with Israel, what, if anything, is off the table. I mean, are they going to start going after hospitals in Iran the way they do in Gaza? That's the playbook they've pursued in Gaza to make life unlivable there. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Israel, attacking militarily what the U.S. has already been attacking economically, going after civilian infrastructure even more than they started doing. And then beyond that, they also have the MEK, which they've armed, and I'm sure the MEK has been primed, like the MEKs that, whatever you want to call them, a marginal dissident group inside Iran that is backed by the U.S.
or outside, but
or outside. Okay, but they claim to, so groups like that, I mean, they'll try to pursue a Syria dirty war strategy, use proxies to fight for them, because they're not going to. I do not see the U.S. sending in ground troops. I mean, Trump might be really delusional, but I don't think he's that insane. So I think that's the playbook.
Yeah, I agree. They're turning up the heat. This military campaign is really just to add fuel to the fire. That's it. They're going to try to add more sanctions, take out their ability to produce money by taking out the oil and gas fields. There's Balochi rebels that they could, instigate with, and there are a significant amounts of people in Iran that are unhappy. I think hopefully this backfires, this military campaign, because I wonder if, Iranis see dead children in the rubble and still support the idea of a potential, regime change revolution. Hopefully they don't, because I think Irani people, the ones I met, were incredibly patriotic, and maybe they don't like the government, but do they want to destroy and weaken Iran as a whole? Like, a lot of people were, and you saw this on X, there were people who were against the government, but that were still insulted by Trump calling the Persian Gulf the Arab Gulf. So, there could be an element of like pride and morale that is increased by these attacks, hopefully. But one thing that Israel did to Hezbollah, and I mentioned this to you already, Max, but their logic was they have their own spies embedded in the organization. They decapitate, and then those people move up, because you have to promote people from below. And so they could be doing the same thing in Iran. They take out these generals, and now you have a mass promotion at a time where they already don't know who to trust, but you have to elevate people. So you start elevating people, and some of them could be, compromised. And those are the kinds of people that have to decide whether you want to keep fighting or not. So with Hezbollah, I'm not suggesting the new leader of Hezbollah is compromised, but Hezbollah went from, we are not engaging in a ceasefire until you stop what you're doing in Gaza, to ceasefire, retreating behind the Litany River. Israel continues to do whatever they want in Lebanon. And we were told that, Hezbollah is just agreeing to a ceasefire to fight at a later day. But now they're not even able to contribute and help Iran, which is what the point of Iran's support for them was in the first place. So major changes. And so that could be what Israel's trying to do, is turn up the heat, but also, have their spies get a chance to be elevated and promoted into decision-making positions within the IRGC and other places. That's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't know if I have no idea if that's taking place, but there is precedent, just the penetration we saw inside Lebanon, but also the War of the Spooks that took place in the 1970s, in which Israel initiated a process of assassinating PLO officials, going after, and PFLP, but going after intellectuals, figures that were considered the most capable and also the most militant, like Hassan Kanafani, Abu Iyad, then Abu Jihad, and there was use of Palestinians. Abu Nidal was likely a Mossad agent who was killing PLO officials. And what it looked like was what they were doing was they were working their way to, they failed to get Arafat, but they were working their way towards an Abbas-like figure through Oslo and assassinations in order to basically reach an end of the conflict. What they didn't gamble for was the rise of Hamas. So there could be, something short of regime change that they're angling for with Iran through a long process of assassination and weakening the society. There's, clear evidence of Mossad penetration in Iran. Israel's claimed that they set up this secret drone base. This is coming out of, from the Iranian intelligence apparatus, that they have arrested a Mossad agent who is carrying suicide drones inside Iran. This was yesterday. This is going around everywhere. So it's sort of an admission that, there's penetration. You go to Iran and it's like, it doesn't feel like this hyper controlled police state. It's chaotic. Their cities are huge. It's, Israel is a much smaller, close knit place surrounded by walls and frontiers and electronic surveillance, heavily militarized frontiers and electronic surveillance. And, the population is much more successfully indoctrinated inside Jewish Israeli society through the Israeli military. So it's harder for a foreign intelligence agency to get in there and recruit people. In Iran, much easier. So what will it take for regime change? I think there are a lot of scenarios, but obviously Israel has there's no scenario I can see in which Israel will face some reduction in its weapon supplies, or the Trump administration stating, hey, we're not going to send you spare parts for your F-15s, your F-18s, and so on, your F-35s. We're sick of this. You need to do a ceasefire in Gaza. I see no scenario in which the Trump administration does anything material to stop the chaos. The best that can be hoped for is what the American conservative is calling for, the Kurt Mills crowd, which is that the U.S. just doesn't get directly involved. And they're all under attack from the neocons. But, you can see how far the goalposts have been moved from an arms embargo on Israel to just the U.S. not supporting Israel in a regional war directly. Any other questions we need to cover? I think your True Promise 3 is continuing. Israel is attacking Avaz. It's attacking Tehran. Last night, it attacked the areas of central Tehran around Khamenei's home. Ahmad, we know people who live there who were just going through the night in terror. The air defenses are active in Iran as we speak. But I don't know if there are any major issues we need to cover. What do you all think?
Is there anything in Gaza that we should address that we haven't yet? I mean, basically, we talked about the massacres that are ongoing, especially at these fake aid sites. Most of the population in Gaza now has basically been pushed to a really small area, right? And of course, and we haven't mentioned this yet, I don't think, Israel cut off internet access, what was left of it in Gaza. So I've heard a few times from my contacts there, but way less frequently. So I think some people still have access sometimes to signals in a small number of areas. But for the most part, Gaza has been completely cut off from the outside world, on top of being already so isolated, with Israel, taking steps to just remove the last functioning internet cables that gave some people some outside access.
Well, the Holocaust continues in shocking ways we never expected. And aid being weaponized and instrumentalized in order to kill people is just a new level of the depravity and Satanism of Israel. And so when you look at the Kiryat being hit and the military installations being hit inside Israel, those are from where the Holocaust is directed. These are the rail lines to Auschwitz. So from a moral point of view, True Promise 3 is operating on pretty solid ground as long as it's targeting those areas, but this is also turning into a war of cities. If Iran manages to deter Israel, it will alter the calculus in Gaza. That's what I think. It will generate more pressure for a ceasefire, and the pressure on the civilian population in core Israeli cities is going to put more political pressure on Netanyahu, who just barely survived a vote in the Knesset on Haredi enlistment, the enlistment of ultra-Orthodox citizens, 13% of the Jewish Israeli, well, of the total Israeli public, a higher percent of the Jewish Israeli public, which is rapidly growing, participates in the military only at rates of like 10%. And the secular public and the religious nationalist public are furious at them. They want them to participate. But Netanyahu, if he forces them to be conscripted, loses a key linchpin of his coalition, which is very narrow. He loses United Torah Judaism Party, and that, which is the ultra-Orthodox party representing a large contingent of that part of the public. So they worked out a compromise deal. If they had failed to, the coalition, there would have been a new vote, a snap vote, and Netanyahu could have lost power and then potentially be prosecuted on corruption charges. And as I've argued again and again, there's no replacement for Netanyahu. So this war is also keeping Netanyahu afloat for now, but the public, the Jewish Israeli public cannot hold on for that long under these conditions. And so I think Netanyahu is walking on a knife's edge right now. And I think there are other factors which could establish deterrence for Iran outside of meeting Israel's level of technological superiority and force. And I think we need to consider the political factors as well as Netanyahu. Is it true that he fled to Greece on the wings of Zion? Like, did he really just initiate this unprovoked attack, then leave
and then peace out.
and then just peace out and leave, like Trump on January 6th, where he just like led everyone into this FBI trap and then went home and was like watching it on TV, like, oh boy.
Well, I heard that he was really spooked when Hezbollah attacked his home with a drone many months ago, and that they say he gets really nervous and he goes into the bunkers. I don't know if that's true, but I've seen reports about it. And so, yeah, he probably was like, they're definitely going to kill me now. And, but he doesn't know, and for some reason they don't have, they're not being as bold as they should be. But yeah, he left, and that's probably why.
Here's a New York Times piece on Israel's fortress of Zion, the military command beneath Tel Aviv. The country's military intelligence commanded the recent assault on Hamas in Gaza. Translation: Holocaust from an underground bunker made for high-tech air wars. So they cower in a bunker and plan a Holocaust
beneath Tel Aviv.
I mean, I used to eat lunch next to that building because it's just right there.
Yeah.
And when I was reporting inside Israel, I would, actually the restaurant that like had the cheapest, best food in that area. It's not like you can choose like, oh, I'm going to go to the BDS cafe. It's like, you're in the middle of Tel Aviv, so you got to eat somewhere. The Zionist Organization of America has a building there, and they have really cheap food, and everybody eating in there looked like that because they were working at Hakiria. And then they go and cower in the bunker, and then the rest of the population gets hit. But, Israelis are used to just committing a one-sided Holocaust. And psychologically, there's just nothing that has prepared them for that. They do have everyone in their apartment and their home. They have like the safe room, which is reinforced. They all have gas masks that are handed out. The like Israeli anarchists I knew who would go and protest the occupation in the West Bank would all use those gas masks or give them out because they were all going to be tear gassed by Israeli soldiers. And they have bomb shelters across Israeli cities, which obviously, Hamas attempts to build tunnels and they get accused of misappropriating money that could be used to build the Dubai on the Mediterranean. But Israel can build bomb shelters everywhere. And what you have is a society, an entire society that is prepared for eternal, endless war in order to maintain its existence as an ethno-supremacist, Jewish exclusivist state. And finally, it's feeling some consequences, but Iran doesn't have the capacity to penetrate this bunker with 2,000-pound bombs, 5,000-pound bombs. Although they have said they have a 2,000-pound warhead, they haven't yet demonstrated the capacity to penetrate this bunker. I think once this bunker gets penetrated, the fortress of Zion, that's going to be a turning point. But the pressure politically, again, from just the general Israeli public is also a factor that the military and Netanyahu have to consider.
And another potential factor, I mean, although it's hard to imagine right now in this country, is pressure from the U.S. public. If there was huge public outcry, especially from across the spectrum, because there are people in the MAGA camp who claim that they're anti-war as well. I mean, you've mentioned some of them, right? And you have people in Trump's administration who came to power promising to end the wars, including, of course, Donald Trump himself. Imagine if there was some sort of coalition in this country between people across the political spectrum who don't want to have these wars anymore. I mean, for a lot of Trump voters, that was part of his appeal. And currently, he is completely betraying it. Look, here's one clip. This is Trump in campaign in Michigan, where he's seeking the Arab American vote late last year.
We want one thing. We want peace in the Middle East. We're going to get peace in the Middle East. I think it's going to happen very fast. I think it can happen with the right leadership in Washington.
Yeah, right. So there's Trump calling for peace in the Middle East.
Did you hear the guy in the background? We trust you.
We trust you. Yeah. Well, that was that was a mistake. Yeah. But again, at the time when you had his opponent Kamala Harris being a part of an administration fueling a genocide, you can understand why some people were just willing to trust anything that wasn't the Democrats. But obviously that hasn't worked out. So, but imagine if that energy that still exists out there across the political spectrum could be harnessed into a real movement. If there could be some effort to unite people in both parties who don't want war. Hasn't happened yet, but I like to hold that hope that it's possible. And if it were to happen, that could actually have an impact. It could.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, we see it all over X all the time. There are conservatives who are MAGA who are against this and don't want it. But the problem is they keep their protest on this digital app that does nothing. It gets a bunch of likes and engagement.
Yeah.
But if these people were on the streets, you know, like the problem with the anti-war protests are just presented as like leftist, communist, Marxist, Chinese funded. Trump doesn't actually see protests with conservatives. Like I would love to see Nick Fuentes and Jake Shields and all these other people on the right who are giving Matt Walsh and others trouble about, their position on the Iran war, and Charlie Kirk, all those who criticize him. I'd love to see them organize an anti-war protest and protest Trump in Washington, D.C., and show them that there are people on the right. Doesn't matter how far right you go. The point is people exist on the right that are against this and they voted for you. So that I would love to see that.
Yeah. For some people on the left, where we sit, it's difficult to work with people like that because so many views of people on the right who claim to oppose war on other issues, are really abhorrent.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, but
it would produce infighting and things like that. Yeah.
Well, and Max especially has been involved in some of these debates, and Max's point has been that we should not. You have to compromise your views on all these issues where you disagree with the right, but on existential issues like war, it's time to come together. And I personally agree with that too. And
one issue.
But so far, MAGA, as Max talked about earlier, is just showing itself to be a fraud. Like that, that it's all just a cult personality around Trump. And as soon as Trump turns and basically turns America first and Israel first, MAGA goes with them and doesn't raise any objections. So, but maybe maybe I'd like to be optimistic, or at least open to what's possible. Yeah. Maybe that could be overcome with outreach from people.
We see people on the right, like the Hodge twins, for example. These two African American conservatives who have this massive podcast. They're like Joe Rogan. I mean, they're on that level almost. Max, we're talking about people on the right who are opposed to this war with Trump. I was telling Aaron that people on the right are they are against what Trump is doing. We see it all the time on X. The problem is they limit their protests to social media, which does nothing. But if they were actually on the streets in Washington, D.C., and if, you know, the left would not take issue, like, hey, we disagree on so much, but this is a one-issue protest. We just want to prevent war, and so we'll unite on that issue just to show more strength. Then Trump couldn't just present every anti-war protest as, oh, this is leftist, communist, Chinese-funded, blah, blah, blah. Now he's actually worried for his legacy. But right now it's just yapping on X, and it's not really producing much. But I do think there are people on the right who aren't just going to blindly follow Trump on everything he does. And like the Hodge twins, they already tweeted out, like, so what, Trump, I didn't vote for this, you know? And the Hodge twins are these African-American conservatives. They have a massive podcast. They have a lot of influence, a lot of followers, and they're not the only ones who are tweeting this. The problem is their protests don't go beyond X. They don't go beyond podcast clips. And that's the problem. I think it needs to enter the real world and be seen on the streets in Washington, D.C. Then Trump can really feel the pressure.
I agree. And, you know, I don't know how much these influencers actually reflect Trump's base, which just follows whatever Trump does and is kind of a cult. And Trump isn't sending any clear message here, except Israel just, you know, has a right to do this. And Iran got a really tough response. And, you know, he's just not guiding them in any way. There's no clear guidance from him. And yeah, they don't do what the left does. They don't get out in the street. So we're going to go to the military parade, which is supposedly the Army's 250th birthday, but which has really been spun into a fascistic event to honor Trump, which I think is exploiting a lot of Army veterans who really want to be part of it. We're going to go there later and ask them what they think of this war and whether which country would they rather invade, Iran or California?
Yeah.
But you know, there's no guidance from JD Vance either. I mean, nothing's been more pathetic than watching JD Vance. What he's busy like trolling people on Twitter. He was at Les Mis tweeting cringeworthy jokes, knowing that a regional war was about to be
well, he's in Palantir's pocket, right? He's in Palantir's pocket. So
I mean, he did discuss that, I think, with Theo Von. He even acknowledged that Peter Thiel was one of his major backers, and he was asked about Palantir and this contract for Foundry and Gotham that Trump has gifted it. Massive contract that will allow the centralizing of a database of Americans' private data through all these agencies. And he basically deflected and said, what I'm worried about is all this data mining of my consumer preferences. And then he was asked about the Gaza genocide. So, I mean, Theo Von is, you know, so MAGA, if you can even say MAGA still exists, influencer. And he asked him about the Gaza genocide. I think so. It's the same view that Kamala Harris would offer. We pine and cry for the children of Gaza, but Israel has a right to defend itself. He's saying the exact same thing that Democratic strategists told Kamala Harris to say.
Far too many innocent civilians have been killed. That was Kamala's stock answer. Far too many have been killed, and our heart breaks. But we have to keep helping Israel defend itself, quote unquote.
And in a different life, he could have probably been a Democratic politician with a different name. I mean, remember, he used to write for David Frum. David Frum's all disappointed in JD Vance because JD Vance has taken like paleocon positions on domestic issues. But here he's basically abdicating his responsibility to be the restrainer. Everything he was marketed as is just now turning into the opposite. And JD Vance has been on the record saying he opposes a regional war. He opposes the US supporting a war on Iran, that Israel should not be allowed to do that. He's allowed it to happen, and he just punted. I mean, just the level of seriousness it takes to go to Les Mis when you know that Israeli jets are about to launch a decapitation strike in Iran. You know that's about to happen. And you're tweeting, I told Usha, I thought it was the barber of Fleet Street. Isn't this where the barber kills everybody? Like, that's what JD Vance was doing. Pete Hegseth was like at a Florida Marlins game or a Washington Nationals game the day of the attack.
They were chatting about it on Signal, probably.
Yeah. I mean, this is a clown show.
You know, it reminds me of Obama, you know, like Obama knew what was up. He, you know, there's photos of him meeting with Edward Said with Rashid Khalidi.
And Edward Said.
And Edward Said, you know.
And Ali Abu Nima.
And Ali Abu Nima. Like, he knew what was up. And he would, I think he told Ali once, like, I'm sorry, I can't talk about Palestine right now, but I will. You know, it's a tough time for me. This was before he ran for president. But, you know, and then at the end of his presidency, there was some article in the New Yorker magazine about how, like, Obama got a map one day of all the Israeli settlements that have expanded under his watch. And he was like, and the article said he was shocked. He couldn't believe it. It's like, dude, you knew exactly what Israel was doing. You just didn't do anything. You didn't want to use your political capital to take them on. And it reminds me of JD Vance. Like, JD Vance knows what's up. He knows exactly.
He does.
He knows it's genocide. He does know that. He knows Israel is trying to wipe out the population of Gaza, commit ethnic cleansing, destroy their civilian infrastructure. And he has to go on Theo Von's show and pretend as if it's something different, as if his heart breaks for the people he's helping to kill.
So that, I mean, I think that's the problem, is that for the MAGA cult, the leadership has to come from the top, not from Theo Von, who kind of lets him off the hook a little bit. But he's a great dude. You know, you have outside of it, you have like some elements outside of it, but they're never going to be palatable or reach enough people to actually move them. And yeah, they're not going to protest Trump as long as they think that the alternative is, you know, the lavender menace of the Democrats. So there's these No Kings rallies taking place today, protesting Trump, that have absolutely nothing to do with the anti-ICE protests. That I don't think that they're, you know, taking on ICE as an issue, because the No Kings rallies, they're being funded by rich, ultra rich Democrats. They're taking messaging from the Democratic Party's coterie of strategists, and they don't want to deal with the ICE issue, the immigration issue. ICE is like, you know, just it's sort of everywhere, but they don't want to directly deal with it. And I don't think they want to deal with the war in Iran issue. If you listen to the Democratic messaging, it's like, we protected Israel more than Trump. Trump's not even standing up for Israel enough. Like what Chuck Schumer said.
Yeah, no, it's a pro-NATO rally. Like the last major one, it's pro-NATO. We respect our alliances. That's one of the like planks. So it's a pro, like, to the extent they're getting involved in foreign policy, it's let's make sure that we continue the Ukraine proxy war and support our alliances, which also include an alliance with Israel.
Yeah, that was one of their stated planks, was, you know, defend NATO. They have other, you know, points that I agree with. Like Trump is creating a fake state of emergency constantly in order to defecate on the Constitution and increase executive powers to unacceptable levels. And like libertarians should oppose that too. I just don't get the libertarians who supported Trump. There are some valid points there, but I think that if I went to that rally with an anti-war sign, I would be an outlier. And if I went with a sign that came from the heartbeat, like the true soul of humanity right now, what every decent person on earth wants to say, 2 words, fuck Israel. If I held up that sign, I would be like besieged by liberal vigilantes telling me like, hey, that is not who we are. This is not who we are. You need to go. You know, I know that would, I mean, it might be a stunt we should pull if we
Yeah,
could.
I was going to say, just bring the poster just in case.
And, you know, I don't think that it, you know, at the Army/Trump fascist rally, that people will be that enthusiastic about war with Iran, but it won't be like one of those post 9/11 AstroTurf Republican rallies where they're just like, you know, the neocons had them like puppets. It won't be like that, but there won't be any clear messaging because they just wait for Trump to tell them what to think. And they're all being duped on like every issue. Like it's not just Iran or Israel, it's immigration too. Like all those people who want like a a new white America and want to go back to the 50s. Trump is basically offering amnesty right now. He's talking about amnesty for undocumented restaurant workers and farm workers right in front of them, and they're not really like up in arms.
Yeah. And that's kind of why he's, instigating what's happening in LA and other places, because he wants to show people he's pretending to be tough on immigration, but he's still giving the corporations everything they want, which is cheap, undocumented labor.
Yep.
So
yeah, I don't feel like there is any inertia in the U.S. to that would lead Trump to change his calculus on this war, but there are no forces within his base that are pushing him towards it. And all the polls show they're mostly against it. And online, for sure, Christian right influencers are coming out and saying this is not our war. Like, I've never seen that before. Like, on social media, Israel's totally destroyed. And what we need to do is make the rest of the world like that.
I mean, to the extent that Tucker Carlson represents a force inside the country, I mean, here's what he said. He said, the real divide, is this up on screen? The real divide, here, I'll make this bigger. The real divide isn't between people who support Israel, people who support Iran, or the Palestinians. The real divide is between those who casually encourage violence and those who seek to prevent it, between warmongers and peacemakers. Who are the warmongers? They would include anyone who's calling Donald Trump today to demand airstrikes and other direct U.S. military involvement in a war with Iran. On that list, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Rupert Murdoch, Ike Perlmutter, and Miriam Adelson. At some point, they will have to answer for this, but you should know their names now. Who is Ike Perlmutter? I actually haven't heard of him.
He's one of the top Zionist billionaire donors to Trump.
Okay.
And major real estate baron, and lesser known than Miriam Adelson, but it shows that Miriam Adelson isn't the only one. And, I really appreciate Tucker naming some Gentiles there.
Not just Jews. Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, Murdoch is a really awful figure, in all of this, but he doesn't get enough credit. Tucker Carlson obviously did not name Donald Trump among those warmongering villains because he wants to continue to curry influence with Trump. But ultimately, the fish stinks from the head, and Trump needs to be held accountable for what he's done here. Tucker won't do it, but Tucker Carlson, he tried. I mean, props to Tucker. He saw that the war was coming under Mike Waltz, and he called it out, and he may have actually delayed what took place with a strong statement on Twitter, campaigning on the inside. There was photographs of him basically storming into the White House around the time he issued his first statement. Mike Waltz was busted down to traffic duty, and his Israeli advisor, Merav Seren, who formerly advised the Israeli Defense Ministry, was fired. What she was doing there in the first place, how that was allowed to happen, is beyond me. But it's finally happened, and I think there's nothing Tucker can do at this point. And this goes to another point I wanted to make that I forgot to make. It comes back to deterrence. In his statement prior to that, warning about this war, Tucker said that Iran can do enormous damage around the region. If Iran does not make good on that, then no one will listen to those warnings from Tucker and others.
I'm just trying to follow some of the latest news.
Yeah. Well, I saw Adia Bonimo tweet out that Al Jazeera reported that
Guys,
Iran
sorry
is...
to cut in.
Go
I gotta jump off for 10 minutes, so I don't know if you can continue or we can wrap.
Well, up to you, Max. If you want us to keep going, we'll keep going. You can come back, or we've gone for almost 2 hours. I can't think of much else we need to cover, so it's totally your call.
Ahmed, you wanted to make a point? real quick?
Well, Aaron was just talking about like following the news. So Ali Abunimah tweeted out, Al Jazeera reported that Iran is planning a major strike on Israel tonight. I don't know why they're announcing that. I don't know why Iran would telegraph that, but yeah. So apparently tonight, which is now basically, from now until I would say from 3 p.m. till about 10 p.m., we'll see a series of strikes, a couple of waves of more missiles on Israel. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's been expected. Well, I'm gonna cap the stream at 2 minutes, 2 hours. I think we had a good conversation, and we'll be back. We'll be back soon, and I'll continue to host guests from Iran on that you'll see on our YouTube channel, because unfortunately we haven't had the technology to host them live. Unless is there anything else anyone wants to add now?
No, I think I'm good.
Hold your peace. Yeah, no.
Yep.
Thanks to
Thanks for
everyone watching. Please like the stream; it helps us beat algorithmic suppression. Please share it if you're so inclined, and support the Grayzone if you can. Ahmed, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. It was great to get your perspective.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll do it again. Where can people find your work?
Search Propaganda & Co. on YouTube, on X, and on Instagram. You'll find our accounts, and you'll see our videos. You'll see our propaganda. You'll see my crazy tweets. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Well, we'll see you all soon. We'll try to be back here sooner than we usually are. Thanks so much for all your support, for liking this stream, for subscribing to the Grayzone, subscribing to us at Substack, and supporting in any way you see fit. I mean, it's your support that enabled me to go to Iran and gather the insight that I did. So we're going to keep doing more of that. And I guess we'll be out in DC seeing what we can see at this parade, and maybe we'll hit a No Kings rally. I don't know. So we'll report back to base later. Peace, everybody.